Welcome to TE326 Maintenance and Repairs of Electrical Equipment. Now, our topic for discussion today is going to center on fault tracing in electrical machines. Now, by way of introduction, let's look at the question on the slide. What will you do if a rotating machine fails to revolve upon starting? Now, I want you to ponder over this question. You have an electrical machine that is supposed to rotate, but it fails to revolve upon starting. Now, as you ponder over it, let us see, by way of explanation, by way of introduction, that systematic inspection and test are the best method to determine the location and nature of faults in any machine. In essence, therefore, fault tracing can be regarded as the systematic test which is carried out to determine the location and nature of fault in a machine. The test, of course, depends solely upon the symptoms of the fault. For instance, if a motor appears completely dead on starting, then the obvious place to commence the test is to check the supply. Now, tests are carried out using insulation testers, test lamps, continuity tester, megas, and so on. Now we're going to have a tabular form. We're going to look at the table which is going to be shown now, and then the table now summarizes the various type of faults, the common ones, the symptoms, as well as remedies associated with faults that are peculiar to rotating electrical machine. Now let's look at the table. First of all, we have a type of fault. The first one is machine appearing completely dead. Now, what are the likely possible causes? The likely possible causes, of course, includes problems of supply failure, insufficient torque, or blown fuse. Now, the remedies. Check the supply voltage at motor terminals and also from the isolators, as you are going to see at the demonstration aspect later. Now, another fault, the second one here, is the issue of mechanical noise. The possible causes includes damaged bearings, coupling of lines, foreign particles in air gap, and so on. Now, the likely remedies is to check bearing with a listen stick. If it is unsatisfactory, then you fit a new bearing. You can also check coupling gap and realign. Check air gap, dismantle rotor, and clean it. Now, the third type of fault is excessive vibration, and this is likely caused by defective or worn out rotor, uneven or unbalanced foundation. Now, what are the likely remedies? Now, say you should check air gap, dismantle the rotor and clean it, check the levels as well as check realignment of the base, and if it is not properly aligned, then you should realign it. Then the fourth type of fault is heating of the bearing, and this may be attributed to the problems of either too much of grease, too little grease, incorrect assemblage, as well as problem of overloading of the bearing. Then the remedies includes removing surplus grease, wash the bearings and replace if it is a problem of too much grease, and if it is a problem of too little grease, then you should replace with new grease. Ensure that the bearing assembly is squarely on the shaft. Then you can also reduce the load on the bearing. Then the fifth type of fault is that of heating of the bearing, and then the likely possible causes are excessive load, foreign particle in air gap, as well as excessive ambient temperature. And then the remedies now includes checking for overloading, check the air gap, dismantle rotor, and clean. Now, you can also check winding with suitable meter. If it is found to be defective, then you should repair or return to the manufacturer. They will also have another fault, which is non-rotation of the moving parts, and the most likely possible causes are supply failure, insufficient torque, or reversed phase. Then what you need to do as remedies for this case is to check supply at the terminal of the machine, check the starting torque and compare with the standard rating, check the face-to-face correction in turn, and then correct where necessary. Now, using the suitable digital multimeters, we're going to demonstrate the process of identifying the causes of this fault that we have just mentioned and the remedies. Of course, the faults as have been arranged here includes machine appearing completely dead on starting, no rotation of moving parts, excessive vibration of the machine, mechanical noise in the machine, overheating of the bearing, as well as overheating of the machine frame. So we're going to see a demonstration of how these faults can be traced and what are the most likely remedies for this fault using the necessary suitable multimeters.
We're going to look at faults again in machine, and this time around is the problem of excessive vibration. Now, if a machine appears to be vibrating excessively, now what are the likely possible causes and remedies? Now, by the time a machine is vibrating excessively, the likely possible causes will be from the rotor side. If the rotor is worn out or defective, there is likely tendency that it will be vibrating excessively. As you can see, if from the demonstration here, if the rotor here is worn out or defective, by the time it is rotating, then the machine will be vibrating excessively. Then there is also the likely tendency that apart from the rotor that is defective or worn out, the foundation also upon which the machine is based, the foundation, if it is not even or balanced, then definitely the machine will be vibrating excessively. Then what do we do? What are the remedies? First, for the issue of defective or worn out rotor, we now check the air gap. The air gap between the rotor and the stator windings should be checked carefully, such that if it is found out that the rotor is defective or worn out, then you have to dismantle the rotor, remove the rotor, and then clean it, and then after cleaning it, check the level and then realign. We also look at for the issue of the foundation. Supposing it is the foundation that is defective, now we replace by the rotor, as you can see inside the system winding there. Now the most likely possible cause is to check the base, the foundation on which the machine is resting, so that if it is not properly aligned, or if the foundation is not balanced, then definitely the machine will be vibrating. Then there is the tendency that the remedy is to realign the foundation to make sure that the motor operates smoothly. Look here, we're going to discuss here or demonstrate here is overheating of the bearing. Now, if the bearing of the motor is excessively getting hot, what are the likely possible causes? Now let us look at the bearing. As you can see, the ball bearings, they are being turned around. If it is getting hot excessively, the most likely possible causes here includes excessive or too much grease. Similarly, if the grease there is also very, very little, insufficient, it is also likely going to result into overheating of the bearing. Similarly, if the assembling of this of the ball bearing here is not proper, or the ball bearing is overloaded, definitely it will result into excessive overheating. Now, what do we do? From physical inspection of the ball bearings, you can easily see if the grease is too much. From this particular bearing, you can see that the grease is actually dried up. So this is most likely to result into overheating of that bearing. But if it is the opposite, supposing the grease is too much, it will also result into this excessive overheating of the bearing. Of course, the most likely thing to do is to remove the surplus bearing and the surplus grease there, wash the bearing and realign. But if it is the issue of too little grease, insufficient grease, then it also apply sufficient amount of grease to make sure that the ball bearings rotate perfectly. And then if it is the bearing that is not properly assembled, then you assemble the bearings on top of the shaft perfectly or squarely in order to make sure that the bearing rotates smoothly. Okay, the next fault is overheating of the frame. Now, you look at the electric motor. Under normal circumstances, you don't expect the frame to be excessively hot. At least it may be warm. But by the time the frame is so hot, as you can see being demonstrated here, then what are the likely possible causes and what do we do to rectify this fault? Now, the first is probably the fan. We'll look at the fan, because the fan is supposed to provide the ventilation, free ventilation to cool the electric motor. So like you can see, the fan is stiff. So once the fan is stiff, it means it's not rotating freely, and definitely the temperature, the ambient temperature will be so high, and that can resolve into the machine being excessively hot. They also look at the bearing, and they look at the casing. The bearing and the casing there, if it is not properly aligned, that is, it will not move, the ball bearing will not move freely. And because of that, it will develop excessive heat, which will definitely transfer into the body, the frame of the motor, and then making it to become excessively hot. Then we also look at the motor. Let's look at this stator and the rotor. Now still, if the rotor is also defective again, it can also cause the frame of it will translate into excessive heat to the frame of the motor, which will also make the frame to be so hot. So what do we do in that case? The best thing is to dismantle the rotor. Once again, let's remove the rotor and check if it is worn out. Then definitely we'll look at the bearings also, dismantle them, clean to make sure that it is working properly. We also check the winding. We can check the winding with our measuring instrument. Let's get our digital instrument once again to go through the windings of the motor. We can go through the windings, set up to the ohm meter, the resistance level. Yes, you on the meter. Then after owning it, go through the winding, the external terminals of the windings to read. Yes, then we're going to take the reading so that to ensure that there is continuity, to ensure that there is no breakdown or short circuit between the frame of the body as well as the external terminals of the winding. If, of course, there is any short circuit there, then definitely that will not only result into developing leakages, but it can also result into excessive heat on the frame of the motor.
Then evaluation. At the end of the demonstration now, these are the questions that I want you to attend to. You're going to brainstorm on these questions. 1. What are the possible causes of excessive vibration in machine? 2. What are the possible cause of mechanical noise in machine? And 3. You are to describe the possible remedies for a machine that appears dead upon starting. Now, by way of summarizing our discussion for today, we have talked about fault tracing. I would say fault tracing is the process of systematic inspection and testing which is usually carried out to determine the location and nature of fault in any machine. We also said that test depends upon the symptoms of the fault. For instance, if a motor appears completely dead on starting, then the obvious place to commence the test is to check the supply. Then we also mentioned that tests are usually carried out using insulation tester, test lamps, continuity tester, as well as Mega. Now, you are expected to send the answers to the questions through my email, which is displayed on the slide. That is adamujeba@gmail.com. Thank you.